Welcome to the Kerrville Bible Church Pastors Podcast, where we seek to encourage and equip you in your walk with Christ by exploring a variety of biblical and theological topics. Stay tuned to the end of the episode to learn how you can submit a question for us to answer on the podcast.
Welcome back to the Kerrville Bible Church Pastors Podcast. My name is Toby Baxley. I'm your host, joined, as always, in studio by Murray Van Gundy, Chris McKnight, and Scott Christensen. And we are back after a week off doing various things. Murray, you were on a mission trip with the youth ministry group, and Scott and Chris and I were in North Carolina at a brand new pastors conference called Coram Deo. And so we want to talk about those things and what stood out at us and how we were encouraged, and how this might be an encouragement to you, our listeners. So we're here with fresh content to encourage your souls.
Very fresh
today. Okay, now you guys talk.
You guys talk. You guys go first, and then I'll.
You're gonna back clean up today?
Yeah. I mean, I'll bring the.
Sweet.
I'll bring the fire at the end.
Bring the
fire.
Nice. Okay.
All right. Well, we went to a pastors conference. About 1,500. We were guessing were there of this inaugural conference, which was pretty successful, I'd say. It was very easy to really get there and experience the conference compared to some others that we've gone to that have a crush of humanity and long lines and chaos. So it was a relaxing, peaceful kind of conference. It was primarily Presbyterians, I would say, PCA guys. It was at a PCA Presbyterian Church, Christ Covenant Church in Matthews, North Carolina, a suburb of Charlotte. And led by Kevin DeYoung. Some of you may know him from sermons or books that he's written. And so he's the lead pastor of this church, and I guess he had the brainchild for this conference, right? And put it together and did the invites and so forth and so on. So overall, for me, it was interesting in that I was thinking about this over the weekend. I didn't have to come down from an emotional high from this conference. It was not a mountaintop experience, as some conferences can tend to be. You know, great singing, great music, incredible solos and musical performances, and sermon after sermon, and you just had this, 3 or 4 day emotional high, and then you've got this kind of recovery period. You know, it's kind of the camp high, that you warn kids about, and this conference did not have that. And I started thinking about it. I was like, that might have been by design. I mean, this may be the way Presbyterians do a conference.
Just kind of ordinary.
Yeah, they don't get too excitable.
Yeah, the ordinary means of grace, because there were aspects of this conference, like every day there was an academic theological lecture. It wasn't even a sermon. It was kind of dry. It was a ton of material. Wasn't a lot of emotion involved. It was just a lot of data, and then there were these panel discussions that were along the same lines, had some humor and different things, and then we heard, what would you guys say, maybe three
sermons.
Really good sermons.
Yeah. Each of the nights.
Yeah, each night. And two of them.
One in the morning.
Yeah, and two of those in particular, I think, really stood out as great sermons. So, but great singing, and great songs, good leadership musically, and the men really, the room was loud and filled out, and that was a super encouragement, as it always is. So that's kind of my overview. I mean, I came home, other than the late night arrival, we got home about, 12:30 or something, and just that, I came home really refreshed and just, pretty much ready to go the next day, ready to preach, and, built up, encouraged, enjoyed the time with you guys, had some great laughs and great food and not so great food. And so, Bojangles was a disappointment for sure, but,
You thought so?
Well, just the lack of, actually having the food in the kitchen that was on the menu, that part of it.
Yeah. Well, we got there close to closing time.
Yeah, we did.
So they were out of chicken.
They were
down to just a few pieces of chicken left.
Yeah.
We would order, and they said, "No, we don't have that."
I got exactly what I wanted.
No, we don't have.
Is this a barbecue place, Mr.
Bojangles?
Bojangles?
Fried chicken.
It's like a Popeye. It's like a deep South version of Popeyes.
Oh, I gotcha.
And we would order something and say, "We don't have that." And then Jay said, "Well, then give me." And they said, "We don't have that." And he said, "Well, just what do you have?"
Give me what you have.
Give me what you have.
Put something on a plate.
Yeah. And we also learned that Chris is planning to trade in his new Honda Accord for a Volvo.
Blasphemy. Don't say such a thing. Yeah, premium doesn't mean large.
Yeah.
Premium means sporty, apparently.
You finally figured out how to shift gears, though, by the time we were about to
Time to go home.
put that back in the airport.
The most exciting part about the conference was actually just driving with Chris.
That's the most exciting part of every
always.
conference.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the most
traffic
exciting
with
part
Chris.
of going to lunch is Chris drives us. Yeah.
Near-death experiences.
Near-death experiences.
Keep your prayer life
if you
fresh.
ever wonder about near-death experiences, they are real when you drive with Chris.
Nothing like Shepherd's Conference 2 years ago when
Keeps your dependence on the Lord fresh.
it just felt like the Lord just picked up our van and moved it over a lane.
Yeah.
That was scary.
Yeah, it was.
Not Chris's fault, by the way. Not at all.
Maybe, well, a little bit.
Maybe a little bit.
I
he
got
says.
I got some specifics from. So this is interesting. Our very first talk, which I was expecting so much different, was Joel Beakey, and it was basically a massive book report of Calvin's Institutes. Mm-hmm. And I was hoping he'd preach because he's a fabulous preacher, and I was hoping he would just lay it on us. But he did a talk on piety of the pastor before the face of God. Didn't seem that great in the moment, but I took a ton of notes, and I'm going back over my notes this morning. It's like, wow, he had some great lines within all of this stuff. And so I highlighted a few here, just a few things. Singing tunes our hearts for glory. So he's talking about the church and the means of grace of the church and how singing is formative. And I love that line. It tunes our hearts for. He means our singing in church tunes our hearts for heaven. That's great. He had another line that really stuck with me. He said, Christianity is idealistic, realistic, and optimistic. It's idealistic, Romans 8. It's realistic, Romans 7. And it's optimistic, Revelation 21 and 22. Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. I thought that was a good balance. And then one more from him. He said, one of the characteristics of piety is love, meaning love for the souls of people. And he said, I just put this in quotes, a parishioner said at some point, maybe it was in the days of Calvin, quote, my pastor loves my soul more than I do. Man, that was powerful.
That's deep. That's convicting.
And wow, to be a pastor like that, to love the souls of people more than they love their own soul. So,
Yeah.
thought that was good.
I think the
have some more I
highlight.
can say about him later.
Yeah. Well, the highlight, I think, for me was the panel discussion with him and John Piper. Piper was uncharacteristically transparent, I think. It seems like maybe he's far enough along in his Christian life that he's like, I don't have anything to hide anymore. I don't need to keep up appearances of what people might think about me. And it was really refreshing, I thought. And the thing that I really took away from that is him talking about, he's been walking with the Lord probably, 60 years. I think he's like 78 now. Right. And so he's probably been walking with the Lord about 60 years. And he said, it took me till about 12 years ago to realize that I have to do the same violence to my self-pity as I do to my lust. Mm-hmm. When Jesus says, if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. He said, that's violent. He said, basically, Jesus is saying, take a screwdriver to your eye if you can't keep from lusting after a woman. He said, it took me 60 years to realize that I had to do that same violence to my self-pity, my sullenness, my just being withdrawn.
Yeah, moping around at home.
Well, he talks about coming home and
hurts his feelings and just moping.
Yeah,
and
they've got a daughter. They've got an adopted daughter, I think, that's in her mid to late teens, I think. And he said, when I come home from the office and they don't greet me, he said, and that hurts my feelings. He said, I have to go up to my home office and get on my knees and do battle with that sin.
Yes.
Of having my feelings hurt.
Yeah. What I appreciated about him saying that is that, brought him off the pedestal. So many times these, what I guess we could call them celebrity type pastors, that are highly revered, in the evangelical world, to show that that pastors are they're regular guys. We are, men that struggle with the same issues, same sins, same weaknesses that everyone else does. And when you put pastors on a pedestal and assume certain expectations, and there's a sense in which there are expectations that are placed upon pastors. There's no question about that. But too often, I think we are whitewashed, in the eyes of our congregants, of our members.
Right. And we probably contribute to that whitewashing ourselves. It's that fine line of how much confession do we need to be doing publicly and how much do we contribute to that. And I think Piper was kind of implying that he contributed to that, he said it was like 2010, right? 2010 that he kind of had this revelation. And I told the guys, I've heard him in a lot of conferences and a lot of Q&As. I've been to his own pastor's conference 2 or 3 times where he's, front and center, and I've never heard him so transparent and so open and vulnerable like that. And part of it is he's not a pastor anymore. Yeah, he's not at a church. He's not on a staff. He's
not under the microscope.
He's not under the microscope. Yeah. He's 78. I'm assuming he's I'm sure he's given nearly everything away, but I'm assuming he's okay financially. He's got his Desiring God massive ministry, and he does conferences. He's always in demand in conferences. So, it's interesting to me that those two things line up, that this openness and this transparency is now outside the context of I'm pastoring a church every week sort of thing. Yeah. But, that was very rich. That was good. When he was preaching, this little 78-year-old bald man with his wild hair everywhere, I'm just looking at him and going, this feels like what Paul must have looked like, just like this booming voice out of this little scrawny guy in 78, and man, he can still bring it. Yeah. And he lacked a little energy toward the end, but he can still preach. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that I really think that panel discussion was probably the highlight of the whole thing for me. Yeah. It kind of hits me where I am. I can struggle with those same things, self-pity, sullenness, at home. And so that was very convicting. Another thing that I don't remember, it must have been Piper. It sounds like Piper, who said, I have to get up and get happy in Jesus.
Oh, yeah, that's Piper.
Because my people, my church, my family, they need my happiness, and so that was something. And then Beaky's huge on family worship, and so that kind of re-upped my desire to lead my family in that specific way, being intentional about that.
Yeah. So back to Beaky for a minute. Under his talk on piety, he had a subheading called cultivation, and he was just talking about the ordinary spiritual disciplines. Basically it boils down to read your Bible and pray every day, but really underneath that is meet with God, which Piper would say get happy in Jesus. It's all the same thing. But he had this to say. I know this. Everybody, it was like you could feel it in the room. He said the common denominator of apostasy among pastors is a loss of Bible meditation and prayer, private, personal prayer, that you can go and drill down in all the guys that fall away, whatever their sin was, sexual, money, drunkenness, whatever the sin was, underneath it, and somewhere along the way, they let that slip and let it go. And he talked about, I guess the Puritans came up with this idea of the meditation is the halfway house. I love this, the halfway house between Bible and prayer. Mm-hmm. So you start with Bible, and then you meditate on what you've read, and then that fuels prayer. And so it's this halfway house between those two journeys. So that was really rich, very encouraging, very convicting, a great reminder that at the end of the day, what all of us as pastors have to be doing, what all of us as Christians have to be doing, is meeting with God. Yeah. In prayer, in the Word, those things all come together. Yeah.
And there's a danger in getting up and kind of performing the act of reading the Bible and praying that is not actually, if we're just going through the motions, I think we're missing the point of the whole thing, and it's to meet with God. Right. It's not boxes to check off of a to-do list. It's meeting with God. And it reminds me of something another pastor said, that, when, especially for us, the four of us, or elders or pastors or anybody, Sunday school teachers, when you are speaking for God, and preaching and leading the way we do, we're speaking for God. You either have to know God or you have to pretend to know God. And so that meeting with God regularly is how we can speak for God and actually know God and have something to offer that's besides our own imaginations.
Right. And I would say, and back to this one word, the key inside of all of that is meditation. Mm-hmm. We can read words, and obviously you can read words and not even register at all, even at any level intellectually. You're just reading the words. Then you can read words and you can take them in intellectually. You can educate, you can understand. It's all mental, right? And then you can read them and stop and start to meditate and chew and apply. And that it's in that meditation where we're actually meeting with God.
Yeah.
That is God. Luther said it this way. He said, God mediates his presence through the Word of God. The Scriptures are how God mediates his presence to us and speaks to us. But that speaking to us doesn't happen apart from meditation, which, of course, is the hardest part of this process.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's the one that takes the most energy and the most time, and it's so much beyond I read, I pray, which, I'll confess, that's my normal. My normal is I read, I pray, that's it. I've checked those boxes. I'm reading through the Bible. It's the rare 1, 2, a good week would be three times a week that I've really meditated, and my soul's been really fed.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean I need to stop that other stuff, right? That's the good habits of grace. Just keep doing them. But the key of all keys is the deep, thoughtful meditation.
Right. Well, you think about that in terms of maybe spending time with your kids or spending time with your wife. Quality time only occurs within quantity time. So you have to put in the quantity of time in order for the quality time to ever happen.
But you could have quantity without quality, easy, right? Just be in the same room, right? But there's no quality to that. Yeah. So I think I like that meditation, and that meditation is a little bit less black and white, And I think just what you're saying, Chris, that it really emphasizes that it's not how much you read. What if you because you can't really meditate on 4 chapters.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying don't do a Bible reading plan through a year or whatever, but I think that, maybe less is more sometimes.
Yeah,
all you guys have done that at times in your walk, and maybe could make the argument that it's even been richer in the meditation department when you've done that.
Could be one verse, could be half a verse.
Yeah, could be,
absolutely.
Inevitably, what I think what happens is you're reading, this happened to me this morning, you're reading a passage, and then something strikes you, a phrase, a statement, a verse really strikes you and just kind of arrests you, and then you just have to stop. You're reading at that point, and then you're just, you read it over, and then you just start to chew on it, and you're like, okay, wow. And I think that's, it's not rocket science.
No.
You're just deeply engaged with what is being communicated, in this phrase or verse or passage.
Right, but it's spiritual. And you said something there I think is the key, because when we are arrested, when that happens, where's that coming from?
Yeah.
Right.
That's got to be, doesn't that have to be the Holy Spirit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Saying, slow down, stop. This is it. This is it, not the rest of the chapter. This is it. This is what you're here for.
And that's okay. And it's so antithetical to what we're used to doing, because we're like, well, I need to finish the chapter. Mm-hmm. Right. I have 10 more verses. I just need to finish it out so that tomorrow I can start on a fresh chapter. Like how often do we stop in the middle of a chapter and go, you know what, I'll pick up where I left off tomorrow.
Like, who told you had to finish the chapter?
Exactly. Who put the chapters in?
Yeah.
That's right. We did.
And that's good.
I think that's being sensitive to the Spirit. That's really what I'm looking for when I'm reading my Bible. I'm looking for those arrest me moments. Right.
Yeah.
I had one in Ephesians. You said that. Boom. We're doing Ephesians with my D3 guys. We're in the prayer in chapter 3. For this reason, I bow my knees before the Father. This next phrase did that. Mm-hmm. From whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name. It's like, whoa. I just stopped and sat and think about this for 20 minutes. Why does he say family? What does he mean by derives its name? What does name mean?
Yeah.
Who are these people? What's he talking about? And just on, and just like, oh, this is really rich. And we spent 15 minutes talking about it in our D3. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. But that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. So, yeah. One last thing on Joel Beakey, and I'll leave him behind. This was my highlight of his talk on piety, and you guys will remember he's been at his current church 37 years. He had been at 2 previous churches short term, very short term, 2 years, 3 years, and then this long term. And so maybe this was a panel discussion, maybe this was his talk, but he talked about longevity in a church.
Yeah, that was the panel.
That was the panel.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just, he said things like, especially after the 10-year mark, you start to experience things as a pastor that you didn't ever experience before. And this all resonated with me. I was connecting with everything he said here. He said you start to be seen and feel like a father figure. He told us about how he looks around during singing, during church services, and it's not in a prideful way. It's in a way of praising God. He looks around the congregation while he's singing, and he reminds himself of the stories of people's lives that God had allowed him to minister to. And you see so-and-so singing, and you know they've been through such and such, and that deepens your own worship in the moment that they're in church.
Yeah.
And they're persevering, and they're singing. And he talked about, man, even if I guess I'm sure he's had many opportunities to leave this church that he's pastoring now 37 years. And he said, how can you leave? I'm unable to leave a people that I've got so much invested into. And it was just so precious and rich.
Yeah, that's good.
I love that guy.
Yeah. Yep.
He really ought to publish my book. I mean, I love him so much. He should publish.
Write the forward.
He
can write the forward.
He wrote the forward.
Oh, he did write the forward?
He did write the forward. So now we just need to get him to publish it.
Yes. Maybe so.
You should have gone to talk to him.
I know, should have. I didn't want to put him on the spot.
Yeah. One thing that struck me was, and maybe Toby has more to say about this, but the traditional Presbyterian liturgy.
Okay.
That was done for the evening services, where they had a whole program and a lot of responsive readings, both from Old Testament, New Testament. And then these prayers, a prayer of convocation, a prayer specifically of adoration, a prayer of confession. I forget, there was a fourth one. Do you remember?
Intercession,
yes.
Right.
And, at different points within, interspersed within this whole order of service. And just really struck me, how rich it was and, different than what we do. And I know, Toby, you're seeking to implement, maybe some things that we learn from experiencing that. But just was really powerful. And the one point that I want to make about it was I was deeply impacted by Beakey's thoughts on what we just talked about as well. And whatever that night, I think, when we had that service and there was that prayer of confession, it brought to mind the conviction that he had brought to me. And it was a time for me to just, confess before the Lord my own shortcomings in terms of my own devotional life. And I just thought, what a powerful thing to have as part of our services is this time of confession that we don't often have in our services that I think really gets people focused and forced to think about how they prepare their hearts, to worship and to hear and receive the word, later on in the service.
Yeah, right.
Very powerful.
Yep. Amen.
Agreed.
Murray, tell us about your trip.
What's our time? Where are we at on time?
I don't know. 24 minutes.
Oh,
we're good.
Yeah, we got lots of minutes.
You're on board now.
24. So I've got 6 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. So we had a great trip. We're thankful for the church for praying for us, and And even though it's just 5 hours away, but truly sending us. And, I really liken the youth ministry to an equipping ministry, and that's my heart behind it. And we get to go to the Judeas of Acts 1:8, which, let's say is outside of Kerrville, to get to be witnesses for Christ, which is great. But it's really it's for me, we get to go do that. But for me, it's taking our little flock and equipping them to do it. And then the fruit that comes from that might be immediate fruit, it might be fruit over the next year, and Lord willing, fruit that would be of the equipping the saints to do ministry would be for a lifetime for them, right? And so for me, that's why I desire to do things like this and set up trips like this. And so it's kind of twofold. You get to go preach the gospel, but you get to equip the saints to do ministry. So that's kind of, if you had to press me, kind of the methodology behind the madness of doing it, whether it's to Dallas or to Sierra Leone, or tonight we're going to be doing street evangelism as kind of a follow-up from students who were doing it this week. At spring break, we're going to do it in Kerrville tonight for our youth ministry, So hopefully no students are going to listen to this podcast before that, because they're not supposed to know what we're doing, because they might not show up.
They might not show up.
But so anyway, so it was good. Lord really watched over us, took care of us. We had good ministry in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Our first full day there was spent with Mission Arlington. Mission Arlington is a gospel rescue mission right in the center of Arlington. That is not they feed people, they give free health to people, but they don't have housing there. And so they have relationships with 300 apartment complexes and trailer parks in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And that week, it was interesting. I didn't know this was going to happen, but there were a ton of other youth ministries there from all over. And they were doing similar things that we only did that one day. They were there for the whole week. But that week that we were there, the director of this mission, she is pushing 90, slouched over, comes out, and she gets all the leaders gathered together and says, here's what we're doing. And when I met her the first time about 6 weeks ago to go set the trip up, she had her full commentary of John MacArthur. So I was like, well, that's pretty good, But this old lady, I'm telling you, you wouldn't think in a million years that this is what she does. She's the director of this mission. And She said, we are going and we are taking the gospel to these apartment complexes. And they were projects. It was projects for sure. And that week alone, through the ministry of that mission, they were going to go to 60 apartment complexes.
Wow.
Just for that week alone, which was great. And we got to go to 2 different ones through that day. We went and did our morning ministry with them. You could call it a very shortened VBS even. It was going door to door. She said, we've already built relationships with these apartment complexes. They know you're coming. You're going to go door to door. There's going to be signs on some people's doors that say, do not knock, because they know what's coming, And it wasn't a lot of kids. Our first one, maybe 12, 15 kids, and same maybe at the second one. But even just getting to go door to door and talk to the families to invite the kids, and then taking the kids, she said, you walk every single kid back to their apartment complex in groups of 2, a lot of things, she said, and you can undo a lot what we've done in one day. We've done a lot. We've laid a lot of groundwork. You could undo a lot what we've done. But anyway, that was great. Day doing that. 2 different apartment complexes, some good spiritual conversations. Allison and I had a great conversation with a mom and her daughter and son-in-law. I don't think they were married, but her grandchild was with us, and she was my age, this lady. And we were able to, we trained on 3 different methods of evangelism. One was the 2 diagnostic questions. You could use a religious questionnaire to use that as your your opening in it, but you could just use the 2 questions. If you died today, do you know for sure you'd go to heaven? If you did die today and stand in front of God and he said, why should I let you in heaven? What would you say? So in between that, you say, can I share with you how I know if I died today, I would go to heaven? And everybody had worked on their 3-minute testimony to be able to share that. We did the EvangeCube, which was great with the kids. EvangeCube just looks like a Rubik's Cube in the sense that you walk through the story of the gospel, and our students really worked on how to tie their testimony when they're talking about the sin that separates us from a holy God. Talk about your sin, and then anyway, that was a method we used. And then I think probably the easiest one is we have, when I first got here to KBC, there's a ministry called Pocket League Testament. And if you give a donation, they'll send you as many. At this time, it's the Gospel of Mark. They'll send you as many Gospels of Mark as you want. So we gave them a $40 donation, and they gave us 1,500 Gospels of Mark. I was like, they come in boxes of 100. I go, I'll take 15 of them. Yeah. And so we started using those my first month here, And so we have a lot of those, and they're great. They're in a format of a square, and it says Life Book. So it's a great tool to walk up to someone and say, have you ever heard of the Life Book? Don't say, hey, can I interest you in a life book? Would you like a life book? You don't do that because they're going to say no. Everybody's going to say no to offering them something. You could have money in your hand and they're going to go, no, what's the catch, right? They won't take it. But if you say, have you ever heard of the Life Book? Well, nobody has heard of the Life Book.
Right.
So immediately they say no. Even if they're not interested in talking to you, like at the stockyards, they say no and say, well, it's about the life of Jesus and how you can know you have eternal life. Can I share with you how I know I have eternal life? So it's a great thing. So Alice and I got in a great conversation. Heath had a great conversation, maybe a 45-minute conversation with a guy who had been shot in the back in a drug thing gone bad 20 years ago. And so he was wheelchair bound, and Heath just sitting on the ground talking to him while he's in his wheelchair. And the students, of course, did great giving testimony and loving on the kids. They love kids, of course, and the kids love them. So good stories there. Then that evening, we met a young lady who had done ministry with me a long time ago in youth ministry. Her and her husband are missionaries in the area, and they purposefully live in Irving, Texas, in a predominantly Hindu Muslim community. So we met them. We went and took the kids to some Indian food. Amazing, Toby. You being a foodie, you would love this Indian food. And half our kids are like, what are we eating? And it wasn't cheap. I was very disappointed in some kids that didn't finish their meal. I was taught you finish your meal, So. They're like, man, a burger would have been better. But anyway, so we had an Indian meal, and then we went to I'm telling you, this place, and Allison brought it up. It's called Thomas Jefferson Park, but it's been renamed Gandhi Park, and they have a huge statue of Gandhi, bronze statue of Gandhi in it. Not a single white person in this entire community. And it's it's surrounded with nice apartment complexes, but it's a huge park right along a waterway with bridges. I'm telling you, you would have thought you were in India. It was crazy. I'd never seen something like that in America. Wow. And this girl, Rachel, and her husband and a couple other couples have planted themselves in these communities to be witnesses. Wow. And so we got to go, and it was, a few good conversations with people, did that. And then the next day we went to the Fort Worth Stockyards in the morning. We had joined a guy who does open air preaching. I call him Will D because I can't forget his last name. So Will D. And man, this guy's on. I mean, he is an amazing testimony of God saving him from drugs, and this guy is solid. He's with George Whitefield Ministries. He went to Master's College, and then is now on staff through a George Whitefield ministry, and he just raises support to do it. But this guy is awesome, and so they literally stand on a box and just open air preach. Cops were called and security coming up and telling we got and we just kept going, but it was hard. It was really Cade Broughton talked about this on Sunday in his little testimony, but really a picture of America,
right?
9 out of 10. No, thank you. I'm good. No, thank you. I'm good. No, thank you. I'm good. Have you ever? And so I would just, because I wasn't going to give them out, I'd say, have you heard of the life book? They said, no. And they'd just be walking. I'd say, well, it's about the life. And I'd be walking away. It's about the life of Jesus and how you can know you have eternal life. And a couple times a person would stop and then you might engage in a conversation. But 9 out of 10 didn't want to have it, didn't want to hear it. And it's a difficult thing to do that kind of street evangelism. But once again, was there a little fruit from it? I believe so. The major fruit was us, was an equipping that might last for a lifetime of, okay, because when you get rejected enough, you don't feel so bad about being rejected. Right. But the first few times is an awful feeling. But once you do it, you're kind of feeling like, okay. Whatever. So then when you have someone that engages, it's like, oh, this is great. Like they stopped and we can engage. And you're bold.
Gives you confidence.
It gives you confidence, you know.
Right.
But really a picture of in the days of Noah, right? And Jesus says they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage and that kind of stuff. And imagine Noah, right? Imagine, Allison brought this up on Sunday, but imagine Noah as he was given the mission of God and people are like, man, you're an idiot. Like, what are you talking about? It's not going to rain, you know, but then all of a sudden, you know, however many years, 120 years, whatever it was, some rain starts falling and they're like, oh, all right, well, whatever. But they're still mocking him and making fun of him. And then that rain starts to get up ankle height. Yep. Like, whoa, what's going on? But they're still doing their own thing, and then it gets up to their knees, and then their waist. Now people are climbing up trees. You think when they were making fun of him when it was dry, now they're in the highest part. They're looking like, what is going on? And he's been preaching the message of salvation, you know, and God's message of salvation and no response. And the only people saved. So now they're on the highest mountaintop, the last bit. You know, you watch those movies, people where the water's going above, you know, and they're putting their head real high, and pretty soon you're under it with no chance. That's it. There is no second chance after that, you know. And so just thinking about these people, and that was a real ministry, I think, to us. And every night, you know, we went through the Sermon on the Mount for our team devotional in the morning. And then at night, you just have a team debriefing time. And that's really the sweet time of what's the Lord doing in you? What are some conversations you had? And that's when kids, students, and leaders get to kind of debrief. So that was good. That was on Stockyards. Then we went to a Muslim mosque that afternoon that Rachel, the young lady I talked about, she has kind of a relationship. And interestingly, the imam is from El Paso, and he's from the west side of El Paso. We knew the same, like that mosque was 2 miles away from Coronado Baptist Church. And that guy apparently is a world-renowned imam.
Wow.
Like he in the Muslim circles, this guy gets called to do everything. So he gave us a little Q&A. He goes, come on, you guys ask every question. So Quinn had said, hey, Dad, can I ask the question about where does it say in the Quran to murder all infidels, you know, all everyone who's not converted to Islam? I said, no, don't ask it. But when this guy started just saying, hey, you guys, this is it. Y'all can ask me whatever you want. And I told Quinn to go ahead and ask it. And they have an answer to everything, of course. I mean, it's a studied religion. Yeah. This isn't brand new, you know. Right. And then after we broke from that, some of the teenage boys that were there in the mosque, because they were there for prayer, and it's Ramadan. Right. So it was packed. It was kind of, there was this sense, and we had to really kind of decompress with our students, but there's a sense within that of such reverence for the Quran, reverence for the worship of God, reverence for a holy God that Christianity misses sometimes. Right. I mean, they don't put the Quran on the ground. They have a little, as soon as the guy goes, he says, hey, go get that Quran, the translation over here, and bring it to me, the imam, as he's talking to us. And the guy brings a little tripod book fold so it doesn't touch the ground and sets it on it, you know. Right. And then watching them come in for prayers, we were just there sitting and observing and praying ourselves to the one true God. And but after that all broke, a lot of the teenage boys stuck around and talked to our teenage boys, and they really got into it. Yeah. They really got into a good 20-minute debate. You know, it was kind of fun. And so then we leave that, and Rachel, you know, hey, let's talk about what's true, what's not true. Let's talk about how you're feeling about what we just experienced, and let's talk about the one true God and what separates Christianity from all other cults, religions, whatever, is the person and the deity of Jesus Christ and his work on the cross and his resurrection and ascension. Period. The end of story. you got to deal with Jesus. So anyway, that was good. Just good equipping for us. And then
what would you say was your highlight of that part of the trip? Like, is there any one moment, one time that would stand out?
The evangelism side of it?
Yeah, for you personally. Before you got to Charis Hills, is there anything that just stands out for you personally that you would say, I want to remember that for a while? That was...
Personally, I mean, I'd say, because I'm thinking about our people, I want them engaged. I want God to equip them. That's a general thing that is ongoing. I'm thinking about it all the time. But would be just Allison and I's personal conversation with Kathy, Miss Kathy. This project was an predominantly African American projects, and Kathy standing out there with her pit bull and her son-in-law who had just gotten out of prison.
Okay.
And her daughter's and that conversation with Miss Kathy, because when we asked her the question, she goes, "Well, I think I'd tell God that I deserved it. I deserved to go to heaven, even though." And then you back up from there, and just really good conversation. And she was very engaged, and we probably spoke to her for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So personally, I'd say that's what would stand out to me, and getting to do it with Allison, because then we get to talk and because Allison had already gone over there and engaged. She walks up to that pit bull who had a big cone around his head, and she just starts petting, and you see pit bulls pit bulls that are chained up to a post,
Right.
and Allison's, "Oh, he's so cute," and just loving on that dog, and his tail's wagging. But you don't know when you do that. So then I walk over and I take a life book, and we get into a spiritual conversation. But that was fun to do. So anyway, and then Charis Hills, obviously, Rand and Colleen back on serving at Charis Hills and ministering, and Rand said if anybody were to ask questions about him, that he's healthy. He had a checkup even while we were there. He's healthy. His heart's healthy. And they've left the church that they were a part of, where he taught Sunday school for so many years, to a little Bible church, I think in Decatur, and trying to re-engage in a church life. They were having some pushback with their theology at the church that they were at, and so little Bible church. I think maybe even it's called Grace Bible, but they're doing well, and it was fun. They didn't have enough work for us. We outworked the list that they gave us. Mark Deere, who's taken over the men's trip for this year, met us up there and had a list for us, and I told him 2 or 3 weeks before we were going, I said, "Listen, give us a long list, because these guys are good. I mean, our students, when they put their nose to the grindstone, they're going to do a lot of work. Shoot, what they thought was going to take 2 days was done in about 3 hours.
Oh boy!
So they were scrambling. So we did a lot of the men's projects. So they've had to re-scramble to
figure out.
Yeah, and we even left a half day early, from doing stuff. But great time. That's really a time that is. You got the people in ministry who have speaking gift, which you tie that into going out and evangelizing, and then you have the serving gift, which would be going and picking up a paintbrush. So we got to do both of those things.
Yeah.
And so those students get to walk out of that and go, "Well, yeah, I really like this better. I really feel even, it was great to get to go do that, but I like this." Or to go, "Wow, I didn't think I'd like this." Matthew was an example last year at El Paso, a guy who would have thought, no way was I going to feel led and invigorated and motivated and moved by the evangelism, but that's his thing.
Yeah, he loved it. He was engaged several people at the stockyards, and
so y'all's kids went. So y'all got personal insight into this a little bit.
Yeah,
the trip and their experience of it. So I think that's really cool that you come here as a more seasoned, older, more mature, family, youth and family pastor.
Yes, sir.
Right. And the other and 2 other guys on the staff have kids
in it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's super cool. I mean, I think that's just a great situation.
Yes.
So what did Matthew think of it? Did he have a great time?
It wasn't the same high that he had coming back from El Paso, but yeah, he goes, "Okay, I got to tell you about the trip," and he laid it all out, and but the stockyards was, I think, impacted him, and then going to the mosque and talking to those teenage boys, really got him to thinking about, okay, how do I defend my faith and defend what I believe is true, and And so we had a good conversation with all that.
Yeah, the boys said after driving away from there, they said those teenage boys knew our faith way more than we knew their faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
They knew a lot more about Christianity than we know about Islam.
Yeah.
And so that maybe be some equipping of that.
Yeah.
So anyway.
All right. Well, I hope this was encouraging to you, our listener. And Lord willing, we will be back next week. I've got a fresh topic, right? Is it going to be my turn?
I think so.
I think you commandeered this as yours?
Yeah,
okay, all right. So I'll have...
Commandeered?
Yeah. You claimed it.
I claimed it.
Yeah.
Thank you for the English.
Do you know your fresh topic? Are you going to tell us?
I think we need to talk about Easter. It's Holy Week, and we need to talk about whether or not Easter is a pagan holiday.
Oh.
Next Wednesday, yeah, that's right. Next Wednesday is the Wednesday before Easter.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
So bring your A games, and I'll bring my B+ game, as usual. Okay.
I'll just.
Hey, C's get degrees, baby.
C's do get degrees. That's right.
I will just bring my Bible.
Yeah.
You can. Murray will consult gotquestions.org and bring it.
Hey, Chris has brought a few of those in.
I'll bring in a stack of books.
Okay.
And Chris will bring his Bible.
Yeah. And I'll just bring my sunny personality. And it'll be
Tigger.
Awesome.
Your Tigger, not Eeyore.
Yeah, my Tigger. I'll bring my Tigger, not Eeyore. Yeah, that's right. So, all right. Murray, will you close us in prayer?
Yes, Lord, thanks for this time. Thanks for a church that would send us to a pastor's conference to be fed, equipped. Thank you for that in our church. And thank you for those guys that put that conference on, and for our 4 guys that got to go. I pray that they grew in you and grew closer to each other. Thank you for the spring break mission trip. Our students, thank you that you are doing a work in them. They're not an afterthought. They are part of this church. They are part of the ministry, and you're equipping them to do ministry for the edification of the church. So thank you for that. And just pray this would be a blessing to our listeners. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for listening to the Kerrville Bible Church Pastors Podcast. We want to be a resource for you and answer the biblical, theological, or pastoral questions that you may have. Send them to us via email at questions@kerrvillebiblechurch.org, or leave us a text or voicemail at 830-321-0349.